Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Jabeur captures her first title of the year in Charleston.
Ruud puts his season back on track in Estoril.
And Monte Carlo gets underway with the absence of Nadal and Alcaraz.
Kim, Chris, today is the 10th of April and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Monte Carlo is underway and the clay season is underway, and we've got a whole host of tournaments to look back on. Jabeur Ruud, surprise, surprise, has notched up another clay court 250 event. We've had Jabeur as well in Charleston, getting revenge on Belinda Bencic to win her first title of the year. And in Houston, to be honest, it was just a miracle we managed to get a champion because of how much rain was falling across the whole week. I mean, guys, talk about April showers. It just felt like it was all in Houston, Texas over the last week.
It didn't seem like it was a shower. It felt more like it was an April deluge.
I think Francis Tiafoe has earned his Easter eggs, though, after pulling off 4 matches in 2 days to win the title. So I don't know about you, but I'm tucking into Easter eggs. I hope that Francis Tiafoe is as well, given his feats there.
And you haven't played 4 matches, Kim. So
I haven't played 4 matches. No, I don't deserve Easter eggs.
I don't need 4 matches, I feel, to tuck into some Easter eggs. I mean, Kim, what was your specialty in terms of Easter eggs? Are you lint bunny?
I have got 2 gold gleaming lint bunnies staring at me as I'm recording. I do like Millennium. I like my Cadbury's. Just, big chocoholic generally. What about you guys?
I like a Maltese bunny. I'm a big fan of those ones.
Oh, Maltese bunny, yeah.
You can also get them at Christmas in reindeer form for anyone who is also a big fan.
And Joel, I feel like you'd be having an Easter egg maybe with a cocktail or beer,
with
like
a cream
egg.
I am a Cadbury cream egg person. I'm actually always disappointed it's only like an Easter specialty, because I would quite happily eat them all year round, but they only seem to have like a shelf life of like 2 or 3 months in the supermarket, then they go away. Joel. I know, I need to stop.
I don't think they're going to go off.
Yeah, they certainly won't be going off. And they do like Christmas pudding ones, I think, sort of similar but not quite as good. But anyway, I mean, as much as talking about Easter chocolate is fun, we should probably get to the tennis. I know there's been some fun things coming out this week. I know, Joel, you got really excited by this Barbie film being announced.
So many memes coming out of film because of the Barbie film trailer, which I think came out earlier this week. And as I said, everyone I feel getting in on it, showing up on social media, lots of meme content. And I really enjoyed Wilson Tennis of all people, tweeted now I don't know if this is real or if it's going to show up. I'm hoping it shows up in the Barbie film, but they've suggested that they've got a collab going on because they said, did not bring rollerblades, which were featured in the trailer, but we did bring the perfect tennis racket, and it's a Barbie-inspired, all pink Wilson tennis racket. And Stefanos Tsitsipas was very quick. I mean, a lot of people I know, whether they actually look at Stefanos Tsitsipas's Twitter feed is by the by, but he said the collab we have all been waiting for. So that caught my eye this week, and I hope, as much as I hope we see like a Barbie-themed Wilson tennis racket on the big screen, I'd quite like to see it on the tour as well. And it genuinely did get me thinking, which player would you like to see with a Barbie-inspired tennis racket?
Oh, well, I have to say, I mean, one of my highlights of the week, which links to this, is Danielle Collins, who won the doubles title in Charleston. She was wearing Barbie pink leggings underneath like her tennis skirt. And I thought, they are great. Love them.
So you think there could be a bit of a match going on? You think Danielle Collins should get the pink racket?
I think she could, yeah. I think she could like just go whole Barbie theme. I mean, I've got my nails done Barbie pink. I went to a wedding on the weekend, so I'm currently sporting Barbie pink. So I'm loving the bright, like cerise Barbie pink that you get.
I want someone like someone really intimidating, like an Arina Sabalenka really moody on the court, very aggressive, but playing with a pink racket. I think it'd be hilarious.
I think you could say Danielle Collins can be intimidating. I think she does tick the box.
Yeah.
Chris, have you got anyone to throw into the
I'm
ring
trying
on
to
the
think
old Barbie?
who I'd like to see with this. I do think it's real, though. I was having a quick look, and every time there is a tennis-related Barbie, it is a Wilson racket that they have. So there was a limited edition Billie Jean King Barbie, and she had a Wilson racket. But for me, I think I'd probably maybe someone like TFO. He likes a bright colour. We talked about him
that's
last.
a good one. I could
I think
see
he
that.
could pull that one off.
I could see
Raspberry
that.
Ripple meets Barbie. His Raspberry Ripple outfit at was it Indian Wells? That was great. Also, I laughed when you just said Billie Jean King, because I remember Joel saying last year on the pod that she always wears that bright pink suit
yes, that would have been a great show.
But yes, we were amused to see all the Barbie kind of news and gossip going on. But Chris, I think you quite liked what was going on in Monte Carlo. I think
Yes,
pre-tournament.
indeed. I was very surprised. I had to try and figure out what was going on Twitter, because I saw there was a lot of traction around a practice session between Holger Rune and Novak Djokovic, and I couldn't understand why. And it turns out that Novak Djokovic has been playing peacemaker, and he brought together Holger Rune and Stan Wawrinka, which is something that only happens for a very short period of time at the net, and normally no pleasantries are exchanged. Because they're doing all these poses around the net, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. But it seems like peace has been made. No one called anyone a crybaby. No one said, "Do you have anything else to say now?" So I think.
Are you sure this image is not photoshopped?
That is true. That's a great question. The only thing that makes me think it could be real is there was a very long conversation it looked like Stan was having with Holger's mother. So maybe he was still getting some parenting tips in there as well. But no, I thought, it's all a bit of fun. You can really go at it on the tennis court. A bit of that sort of trash talk we talked about last time. And then you could have a lovely time in Monte Carlo preparing for a week of tennis.
I can imagine Djokovic being a bit of a diplomat with those two, getting them to make peace. So nice to see. Hopefully they'll let bygones be bygones now. But let's look at what happened on court last week. We've had a number of tournaments, and let's start with Charleston, which is the WTA 500 event out on the clay of South Carolina. We had the same final as last year, didn't we? Belinda Bencic versus Ons Jabeur, but a different result this time. Jabeur winning in straight sets, 7-6, 6-4. She did have to save a couple of set points in that first set. But yeah, this is her first title of the year. Her first title actually in America. She's previously lost all her finals in the country. So she's managed to tick that box off now and kind of get her season going, because she hasn't had a very good year up to now. And I think this will maybe be the start of, well, not just hopefully a great clay court season for her, but her getting back into the groove that she was in last year. Joel, did you watch much of the Charleston final? What did you think of Jabeur's performance?
Yeah, I mean, throughout the week, I think it was a great performance from Jabeur. She didn't drop a set throughout the tournament, and it felt to me really like it was almost like a reset tournament. She's had very kind of shaky results. It's been very, very stop-start, over the start of this season. And to think, compare that to last season when she got to kind of 2 Grand Slam finals, you would have wanted her to kick on. So I'm really, really happy that she was able to kind of have this reset, and she came up against some really, really tough opponents. I mean, facing a Daria Kasatkina in the semi-finals on a court like this is a very kind of tricky proposition. Belinda Bencic as well, I thought played great this week. She took out Jessie Pegula in the semi-finals. Perhaps there was a little bit of advantage to Jabeur, because I think Bencic had to play a bit. She had to play that second set tiebreak on the day of the final. But Jabeur was just fantastic. We know she's a crowd pleaser as well. She threw in the odd tweener as well, which got the crowd on her side, I think. But she's such a welcoming champion. I know how much she loves this tournament, and it's just great to see her back on track, I think, with the clay season to come, because she's such a great versatile player that I think she can really make inroads into this clay season, and it's great she's been able to do this with the first tournament in the first week of the clay season.
Yeah, and Chris, what was it, do you think, that gave Jabeur the edge? Obviously, I know Bencic coming in and probably played a bit more tennis, a bit more time on court. She'd had to finish off her semi earlier that day, as Joel said. But was there one thing that you thought made kind of the ultimate difference in those two sets in the final?
Yeah, I think it's playing the big points well. I think you see this quite regularly with Ons, that if she isn't necessarily kind of able to bring her best game, then it isn't easy at all in terms of how she performs in those big crucial moments. But it feels like something sort of was really switched on with her this week, coming down from 5-2 in one of the sets against Kasatkina. And then since then, it kind of looked like she was just on the front foot. But I think Bencic didn't necessarily serve as well as she had done that week. She served very well against Alexandrova. That was very impressive because she's had some difficulties with her so far. But I think the variety that was on display from Ons was really the big difference. And I think she was pretty pleased to walk away with the bigger trophy this year.
Yeah.
She just makes you play, I feel like, that one extra shot. I know we talk about that a lot, I think, for example, with like a Rafa Nadal on the men's side. But on the women's side, I think I genuinely put her in that category of she's just so awkward. And as I say, because she has that variety, she's able to kind of pull it out the bag, I feel, from any part of the court, whether that's in the net, on the baseline, on the run, etc. And as I said, when she hit that tweener, I think with Bencic in the net, then hit that passing shot, again, it just shows, I think, that she can be so awkward because you might be thinking you're going to be hitting a winner or the ball's not going to be coming back, but Jabeur, she has that factor, I feel, that just makes it that she makes you play that one extra shot.
You don't know what's going to come back, do you? Especially like that looked like there were some awkward shots that Bencic had to play because you don't get necessarily the same ball twice when you play against Ons. You could get a tweener straight at you. You could also get the slice going past you. But one thing I did think was quite interesting that I wanted to bring up around Charleston was that it was the first time in 23 years that the top 4 seeds have all made the semi-finals. And so the last time that this happened was in the year 2000, and it was Mary Pierce, Conchita Martinez, Monica Seles and Arantxa Sanchez Vicario.
Oh, what a lineup.
Quite an elite club there.
Wow, awesome names. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often in the women's game, that you actually do get the top 4 seeds in the semi. So that's nice to see. Also news that Belinda Bencic has split from her coach, Dmitry Tursunov. Do either of you know why this has happened? Any particular?
I've been looking into it, Kim.
I don't understand.
There's definitely some disagreements between them. So
he doesn't seem to last too long, really, with players lately. I know Emma Raducanu sort of dropped him quite early on.
Well, I think what happened is he has a very specific way of working with people, and he wants to work with people over a longer period of time and build aspects of their game up. And potentially, if you don't have the same area of focus or you don't think it will make the same difference, then it's not a great match. And so what Bencic's manager said, they have a different vision on the way forward and therefore mutually decide to end their partnership, and there is no timetable for a new coach. So it's not the warmest of words. It's not like what we've seen with some of the other sort of departures of coaching, where it's much more wish you all the best, like Patrick Mouratoglou, where that's not necessarily a departure. It's more of a shift in Holger's box in that sense. But yeah, it doesn't seem there's any love lost there between those two.
Yeah, we'll have to see what Bencic does next in terms of her coaching. And just one thing before we move on from Charleston, obviously it was a win for Ons Jabeur. We saw Alina Svitolina back on a court, but it wasn't a win for her in her first match after returning from having her first child. She was up against Putintseva, but lost in 3 sets. Joel, were you impressed by what you saw, given it's her first match back after a long time?
Yeah, I was surprised with the level I think she brought to the court, because I did genuinely think at some points she was going to come out with the victory, which I think was it would have been a very impressive result, given how long she's spent off the court. But we know, I think she's a high quality. She is a high quality player, and it's good. I think these just in her first match back, just show that appetite and that getting back into the groove. We've seen that it can take time for people, especially I feel the longer you've had to take off the court. So yeah, I feel like it's very kind of promising, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that develops across the clay season. But yeah, I think it was a very encouraging start despite the defeat.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go off to Bogota now. We had the WTA 250 event there. We didn't have Bencic defend her title in Charleston, but we did have a title defense from Tatiana Maria in Bogota in the same week. She beat Peyton Stearns in the final in 3 sets, 6-3, 2-6, 6-4. Peyton Stearns is a sort of quite a young American player that, not going to lie, I don't think any of us are too familiar with her, but Maria, I think, using her experience to get the better of her and, you know, defend her title, which is something that not a lot of people are actually doing these days on the WTA tour, is it? Chris, what did you make of this final? Had you heard much of Peyton Stearns? Just first of all, I feel like you know some of the lesser known WTA players. When
Kim,
me and Charles
I swear
maybe
you
don't.
just assume, maybe like me, that any player we don't know on the WTA tour, it's like Chris
know.
has like an encyclopedic knowledge of them.
I think
Sorry,
I have
Chris,
to be
putting you on the
honest on this
spot.
one, where I'd say loosely aware. Like, I think when I had a quick look at some of the results she'd had previously, there was a really close match, which was 3 tie breaks, that was played earlier in the year against Katie Boulter. So I think that's where she had kind of come onto my agenda. But also she's been playing some doubles with Danielle Collins. So I hadn't seen that much of her. I've seen more of her on the doubles court than on the singles court. But no, she's a young American. I feel like there's a lot of Americans who are around the similar age. She's 21. I think it was great to see her sort of fight back in that second set, because, you know, when you're in a final and you lose a first set, and it's quite easy for that to run away from you, especially if you're a bit nervous, because obviously it was her first final. But no, I think it's great that Maria got the win. I think she's had a little bit of time off, and I never think of her as a clay court player. I'm not sure why. I always just think that it's the serve and volley, the grass court play. So I was quite surprised to find out that this is the second time she's picked up the trophy here in as many,
I feel like she's
years.
a Bogota tournament specialist. You know, given the results. I mean, yeah, it was impressive. It's a very unique event, I feel, because of the altitude out in South America, and it definitely did throw up some results that were very surprising. I think there has to be, for me personally, there are questions on the draw and the quality.
What do you mean, Joel? I think this is a great lineup.
You may have just called it budgeter before.
Yeah,
It's a bit harsh, but
I will say though, I think defending a title on the WTA tour, that's just a very, very hard thing to do. I mean, looking at some of the players, or the lack of players who've done that recently, it just shows how impressive that is. I mean, Świątek defended in Doha this year. Świątek in Rome as well last year, 21-22, and Fernandez in Monterrey. But really, that's just very, very slim picking. So for Maria to kind of do the back-to-back in Bogota, regardless of, you know, who she's had to face in terms of like rankings, etc., it's been a very, very impressive showing from her. And it's amazing how I feel like she's aging like a fine wine. You know, she's almost got this, I think, this new lease of life as a tennis player, that, you know, she is certainly for me like a late bloomer or a late developer, and this title again just I think adds to those credentials.
I think that's the ultimate compliment, telling her she's aging like a fine wine.
On the tennis court, yes.
No, I know, but I mean, fine wine is lovely. But we did have a British semi-finalist, didn't we, out in Bogota, which was Francesca Jones.
Amazing.
Making her way through, getting a couple of wins, and then eventually losing to Maria in straight sets. You know, this is the type of, I guess, showing we'd love to see more from Fran Jones. And she doesn't always get the opportunity to play on the WTA tour, and even though it's a 250. But given the lineup, she was able to kind of get that chance, and she made the most of it, really. You know, how impressed were you with what you saw from Fran Jones this week?
It's quite specific, I'd say, that, as we said about the conditions. So I think it is a really good result. I think she actually had 2 weeks in Colombia prior to this on the ITF level, something that I'm not sure I want to admit that I did know. But she's definitely got used to the conditions. So I think that really showed, because some of the players that she got wins against, if we look at some of the names, so like there's Diaz, who's a fantastic player. A 6-1 set is very kind of surprising when you look at that head to head. And then taking out two seeds across her 4 matches. So I think it is definitely surprising, but we have seen that she's able to do some great things, and hopefully she can build on this, and if not, she can stay another couple of weeks in Colombia and see if there's any more events she can be playing.
Yeah, and I mean, some of our listeners may not know much about Fran Jones, especially if you're not following like British tennis, but just a reminder, this is a player who sort of was born with quite a rare genetic condition, so she actually only has a thumb and 3 fingers on each hand. It's a condition known as, I think, ectrodactyl ectodermal dysplasia. But I mean, regardless of her condition, she's playing great tennis. But it's almost, when you see her making like semis and having results like this, it's, you do, it does make you appreciate her, her prowess on the court even more, given the fact that she does have this condition that she lives with. So yeah, fantastic, Fran.
I feel like the WTA could maybe, if Fran Jones would be comfortable with it, like show like or promote her in terms of like I feel like the genuine adversity she's had to overcome in order to kind of compete and show her credentials on the tennis court, because it's a fantastic achievement and a fantastic story. And there has definitely been some down moments. It's been, I think, frustrating. I think over the last year or so, injuries have just really stopped her getting on the tennis court and really kind of achieving her potential. So I really hope that she can kind of just continue just showing her level, and who knows, maybe get to a point where she's playing regularly on the WTA tour. And from a British perspective, who knows, maybe even ask the questions and push into that Billie Jean King Cup team, because I've certainly seen a few people this week talk about these results and wonder, like, in the future, I mean, they're not always going to be on indoor hard court, for example. We might be away on clay somewhere. Does Fran Jones enter the conversation alongside players like Harriet Dart, Katie Swan, Katie Boulter, etc.?
Well, this result definitely shows the potential, because I don't think many of those players have actually reached a semi-final at 250 level. I don't think Dart has this year. And I think that the other player who's kind of showing some good form is obviously Jodie Burrage at the moment, who's been picking up some good wins. So it would be great if Fran could get some wild cards for some of the smaller grass tournaments. I think that would be something where when you are at the level that she's at in the rankings, it is very difficult to get into some of the bigger tournaments. So even if it was just for some of the smaller ones, I still think that would be something that everyone would like to see.
Yeah. We'll look at the ATP tournaments in just a second. One other result I was drawn to in the draw, former French Open finalist Sara Errani losing love and one in the first round to Elena Avanasayan. Do you think Sara Errani should just maybe hang up the racket for good now?
It's not a positive result, I've got to be honest. I think you'd be
Chris,
a bit disheartened.
you as soon as you saw the draw, you had her name penciled out, waiting for that result to come in.
I really didn't think that that she would be the player who would be holding the trophy at the end of the week. I think that is fair to say.
Yeah. Well, and you were correct. So without further ado, let's look at the ATP tournaments. We had a splattering of them all over the place really last week. Let's go to Houston first in Texas. ATP 250. It was won by Francis Tiafoe on home soil, top seed. He won in the final in straight sets, 2 tie breaks against Thomas Martin Etcheverry. This was notable, not so much for that final, but really, like we alluded to earlier, the amount of tennis Francis Tiafoe had to play over Saturday and Sunday. He had to play all his matches in those 2 days. The top seeds, who all had byes in the first round, they weren't able to get on court till the Saturday due to the horrendous weather. So it was a bit of a miracle, like you said, Joel, that this finished on time, given there was so much rain. What did you make of Tiafoe coming through that? And in straight sets as well. He didn't lose a set on route, so very impressive for him.
Yeah, he was a great result for him, front of home crowd as well. I think Etcheverry is going to be a very difficult prospect, I think, for various players higher up the rankings. I think come the European clay swing, I certainly think he's going to be a player that you do not want to face. I think he got to the final in Chile against Nicholas Massu, has made another final here, and he really, I think, did push Francis Tiafoe to his limit, especially in that second set tie break. It very easily, I think, could have gone to a third. So it was, I think, very well done by Tiafoe just to nip that in the bud and get it done in straights, because there were plenty of questions being asked for him, and he did very well. As you said, 4 matches in 2 days. That's not an ideal situation. I don't think that's an ask that you should really be putting on a tennis player. I was actually quite surprised they didn't try and phone up some indoor courts in Houston. There must have been some about, but I generally feel like that's a plan B. So I was a little bit surprised that they just were like, hold off until the Saturday. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but yeah, that's the thing that caught me off guard, I think, a little bit when I was kind of watching the the highlights of the event.
I mean, we've seen people do 2 matches in a day. That's quite typical in the grass court season when the UK weather may be a little bit questionable. So I think that's something that I've seen, but I've never seen people have to go back to back, because if you think about it, going into that weekend, knowing that if you're going to pick up the title, that's 4 matches in, well, probably about 36 hours or something crazy in terms of the scheduling. So I think maybe it forced him to be a bit more aggressive, to try and finish these a bit quicker, because if you're playing 4 3-hour matches, you would have to retire because of the damage that would do to you physically. I think the reason why they didn't kind of move it indoors or look for an alternative in that sense is that people are obviously there to get their clay warm-up in. And so if you do move it inside, it might not be match practice that people are looking for. It's actually time on the clay. So if it was kind of up to the players saying, do you feel comfortable? And they said, yep, we'll give it a go. We want to get a couple of matches in. I think it does make sense that it continued, but I've never seen anything like this.
It's a good point, because Houston's an odd one, because obviously you've got Monte Carlo, on a different continent, start very, very soon after it finishes. And it feels very hard for some of these players in Houston to then go make that trip to Monte Carlo and then be ready for that. And as you said, if they did get asked the question of, we want to get this tournament done, we're going to have to move it to indoor. Well, some of these top players might be like, well, that doesn't help me with Monte Carlo coming up so soon. I'm just going to get on a plane then and withdraw, sorry and goodbye. But I do think it's a bit of an awkward tournament that, we've seen, for example, with Tommy Paul. That sort of lead up to Monte Carlo doesn't feel as natural as some of those European tournaments like Marrakesh and Estoril.
Yeah, because Tommy Paul dropped out of Monte Carlo to play Houston, ended up losing in his first match to Yannick Hanfmann.
Yeah,
so,
really
if I was him, I would have been out in the French Riviera having some nice weather, not sitting around Houston in the rain. Not a wise move in hindsight, but it's a bit of an awkward decision, isn't it, to make? And over in Europe, we did have the Estoril event in Portugal, where Jabeur Ruud, the top seed, won over Miramir Kekmanovic in the title match, 6-2, 7-6. So Jabeur Ruud back to winning ways. He's had a not a great year, it's fair to say. I think he had a 5-6 win-loss record so far this year, which is, you never want to have less wins than you do losses. But he's managed to turn that around a little bit by claiming this title. He does love a 250 on clay. I think 9 of his 10 ATP titles now have come on the clay, and I think they have all been 250s.
Yeah. All 250s.
Which...
Is that a problem? Is that a problem?
Yes. If he carries on and never wins a 500 or beyond, or more on other surfaces, then yes, he's sort of pigeonholing himself into these sort of lower level clay events. I mean, Chris, what did you make of his performance and his form this week, winning this title? He didn't have to play. He had to play some sort of competent clay quarters, but no one, I would say, that he should be sort of losing too much sleep over in normal circumstances.
Yeah, I think going into this tournament, it was hard to know who we thought would win this, because there are so many players in here who haven't necessarily exhibited that much form. I mean, Schwartzman is in a bit of a rut at the moment. We've got Casper, obviously. I mean, I was looking at something the other day that said that he hadn't won back-to-back matches before coming into this event, and that was in his first 6 events of the year, which is the first time since 1977 that a player in the top 5 has not won consecutive matches in their first 6 events. So, I mean, he must be very pleased that there are at least there's momentum going in the right direction.
I hope that exhibition money over the Christmas period and the off season was worth it, because I do genuinely think, I think he's almost admitted himself, like that was not good.
Error.
That was not good. Come the start of this season, and we've seen in the results, and it's something he's going to probably not do again.
Absolutely, he's made it clear that was probably not a good decision. He had to have a second pre-season. Kind of in the lead up towards Indian Wells, so it was all a bit messy. So I think for him, his season really does sort of start now. But yeah, I mean, he did well to win the title. He was pushed in the semi-finals. He didn't have an easy second round either. So
to be honest, I wouldn't have said he played very well, or like the Casper Ruud we saw reach the French Open final last year. I mean, he was pushed to 3 sets by João Sousa in his first match, and then in the semi-final as well. It to me was a player who's still kind of searching for that confidence, and of course, dropping down to this level, you'd expect him to get some match wins, but certainly I don't think his level is just there yet. But it's certainly, I think, good enough. I think for him to win a 250. But having said that, Kekmanovic, I think he was the form player through the week. You look at his results; he was like straight sets, and Ruud was sort of finding a way to win. So it was a little bit surprising, I think, in the final that Ruud, I guess, showed his elite mentality. He's obviously got the bigger experiences, and perhaps that was what told, I think, when it came to that final.
And another former French Open finalist, Dominic Thiem, he got to the quarters, then lost to Quentin Hallis. But he's announced that he is splitting with his coach, Nicholas Massu, who he's been with for about 4 years now. They're parting ways. But in contrast to Bencic having split from Dmitry Tursunov, this is very different. This is a nice lovey-dovey message on social media from Dominic Thiem. Do you think this is actually a good move from him? Given all his struggles, maybe he needs someone fresh to kind of come in and spice things up a bit. Chris, what do you think?
If I'm completely honest, I was a bit surprised when I was watching one of his matches. I think it was against Ben Shelton. I was surprised to see that Nicholas Massu was still there. I thought maybe he'd taken a bit of a step back, or maybe there was more of a team of coaches that Thiem was working with. I mean, it's a no-brainer, really, isn't it? If the results aren't coming, there's obviously, even if you get along like a house on fire and you're doing the same things that you've always done, the same things that brought you the US Open title, if you aren't getting the results, it's time to change things up. And I think we see too many players stay with their coaches because of the strength of their personal relationship to them. I mean, Maria Sakkari is a perfect example of that. And I think also Muguruza. So I think it's a positive thing. And I think for a lot of team supporters and fans, I think it will be a welcome change, because I think something's got to give. Yeah,
I agree. And it'll be interesting to see who he might pair up with going forwards, or where Nicholas Massu might go if he wants to continue coaching on the tour.
I mean, Thiem did get to the quarterfinals though, which has probably been his best result so far this season. I mean, I was reading his aim is to get into the French Open main draw with direct entry without having to go through qualifying. I mean, does this feel like clay court season now upon us? Is this a now or never time for Dominic Thiem? This should be, where he arguably feels most comfortable. I know he's had some great results on hard courts in the peak of his powers so far in his career, but do you feel like we're now entering a very, blank slate, no coach at the moment, or looking to find a new coach? Do you think we're now into a kind of a period that, yes, this, coming back from injury is always like important when being on the court, but do you feel going into the clay court season it's now even more pressurized given the results he's had, or lack of results he's had so far?
It's a bit embarrassing when you say it like that the ambition is for you to get direct acceptance to the French Open.
It feels like that's sadly that's where we're living. I feel with
that's where he's at,
and
really it should be a case of most likely he would get a wild card for that. I mean, I think it would be kind of crazy not to, especially from a Grand Slam perspective. So it's kind of like a theoretical thing where that probably wouldn't happen anyway, but you shouldn't be focusing on trying to get into qualifying or whatever it is, or into the main draw. It should be much more about the results in the matches that you're playing and seeing an improvement in your tennis, because I think there were improvements this week, and I can't really see that he's going to be, and it's not really a big something to celebrate if you're in the top 105 people, whoever it is, that end up playing Roland Garros. So it's a bit of a sad state of affairs that might be the ambition, but I mean, hopefully a quarterfinal's a good result, and let's see where he can go with it, because he looked pretty competent in a couple of those matches.
Yeah, the soul searching might continue for a bit, but maybe he should just throw the pressure off. You know, he's split from his coach. Maybe he should just go out there and try and have fun, and then
just hit the ball, right?
See
I
what
just really want to
happens.
see him let rip.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, good luck, Dominic Thiem. We'd love to see him in the French Open and doing well again. Before we move on to our short break and then the second half, we just have the Marrakesh event to quickly look at, which was won by Roberto Caballes Baena in 3 sets. RCB, yeah. 3 sets over Alexandre Muller in the final. I think this was just sort of a very, he is a very typical Spanish clay courter. Not at all surprised he was the one that came through the draw. He beat Dan Evans in the semi-final as well, so a relatively good week for Dan Evans. It's great to have a Brit in the semis, but again, he didn't have to play sort of two highly ranked players. I mean, a good win over Popperin, I suppose, but bit of a shame Dan Evans couldn't go further. But they had a bit of an issue with the court out in Marrakesh, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every tournament this week was affected by rain. And Marrakesh was no different, particularly their main court, their centre court. It was too dangerous. Shades of Napoli. I was getting flashbacks to Napoli and Naples in terms of like players just did not want to play on it because they felt it was too dangerous. So yeah, it was I think a story, regardless of what tournament was going on where in the world. Rain just seemed to follow the tour this week and cause issue for the organisers. But Dan Evans was I think that was a good result. I know clay maybe not his strongest surface, although he's had some good results on there, but he's definitely also had, I think, not a good patch across the hard court season, certainly over the last few months. So just to get some match wins is great on there. I mean, just before we go to a quick break, I'm just looking. Maxime Cressy, Ben Shelton, Americans who did play in Europe, obviously decided Houston, no, that's not for me, that's not right, in the build up to Monte Carlo and further afield with Madrid, Rome, French Open, etc. If you're an American player, what would you have done? Would you have stuck to your home comforts of Houston, or would you have put yourself out there and be like, nope, I'm going to go back to Europe?
I'd play Europe. I mean, if I could play Monte Carlo, I would, because it's just a stunning setting. And I think if you're ultimately building up to have a great European clay court season leading up to the French, so you can perform well at the Slam, I'd want to be playing probably on the European clay in the lead up to that.
Yeah, and it's a bit of an odd one because we learned through Tsitsipas how some of the points work, and he talked about being penalised for not playing some of these tournaments. So I would love to know how that would work with Tommy Paul not playing a Masters, because that's obviously one of the mandatory events that they have and one of the bigger events. So I think it is a bit of an odd choice to prioritise a 250 for what, I guess, spending some more time at home, which is kind of nice. But I think that obviously that's part of the tour, is you have to pack up and you have to go and you've got to get a good training block in before the clay.
So let's take a very quick break now. We'll be back in the second half where we'll be discussing the Monte Carlo and looking at who is playing, our predictions, and looking at how that's going to unfold over the next week. Also looking at pickleball and how much of a threat that may be to tennis, and also why there are so few WTA 250 clay events before the French Open. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to Tennis Weekly, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And we're going to have a very special par for the courts now, courtesy of Joel.
Yes.
Who's got one up his sleeve for myself and Chris this week.
Hopefully this will be a lot simpler than my last
and
one.
Easier, please,
and
Joel.
easier, exactly. I did tease last week that this was going to be another geographically themed one, but I've actually again going to park that this week. So it was too good to pass up. I feel this opportunity, and potentially maybe Kim will actually win this one, because I think this is home. I think this is home territory for Kim. This part of the courts.
Is it Rafael Nadal themed then?
I'm not gonna lie, that is part of it.
Tourist highlights of the French Riviera.
So my question for you and our listeners, this is a par for the courts back and forth, and it is to do with the Monte Carlo Masters 1000 event coming up. And I have totted up the numbers. There are 23 players who have played in a Monte Carlo Masters final since the year 2000. And of course, my question to both of you is, I would like you to name as many of those finalists at the Monte Carlo Masters since the year 2000. I'm not looking for the year, I'm just looking for a name. Of course, we had an event where there was no Monte Carlo Masters due to the pandemic, but there are 23 players in total. I'm sure Kim at the moment is already thinking about all the players Nadal has defeated.
So this is losing
over the
finalists.
Years. No, I'm just looking at everyone.
Winners
Absolutely
and
everyone.
losers.
Winners and losers.
Okay.
Right.
Let's crack on, shall we?
Oh, Kim, that
I'm
is
not
a
feeling
sign
at
of
all
confidence.
confident.
No, I don't know
That
actually.
is a sign of
but we'll
confidence.
We'll see.
So, who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the obvious one is Rafa Nadal.
Novak Djokovic.
Roger Federer.
Fabio Fognini.
Stefanos Tsitsipas.
Yes, correct. Has won it twice, going for a three-peat this year.
Andrei Rublev.
Stan Wawrinka.
Alejandro Davidovich Fokina.
Yes, ADF on the list. Perhaps maybe one of the most surprising names on the list.
Albert Ramos Vinolas.
Correct. Yes, played Rafa in a final. Yes.
I don't have another one, so I'm gonna take a guess. I don't think Andy Murray's done it. I'm gonna go for a Dominic Thiem.
Dominic Thiem. It's incorrect. Chris has lost.
Oh!
Chris has lost. Dominic
It was
Thiem.
always bound to come.
It feels like it could be a correct answer, but it's a wrong answer.
He's never made the final.
No,
And he never
made the
will, maybe.
final.
Yeah.
No. Wow. Kim, can we just bask in this moment? Chris
I
has
know. Oh.
been defeated in par
Yes.
for the courts.
I'm just glad it wasn't Joel that defeated me, Kim.
You did say it was on my home soil, so thanks, Joel, for picking that one. I was going to say Andy Murray actually later on, because I thought maybe he did get to a final.
No,
he
Andy
didn't.
Murray.
He had a close semi with Rafa, though.
Yes.
yeah.
There were a few other Spanish players, though, you could have
Verdasco.
had. Yes, you
Yeah,
could have had
Verdasco.
Fernando Verdasco. Another
Yeah.
name you could have had, David Ferrer, which I was
Ferrer.
quite surprised no one
Kim,
got.
all these Spanish players for
What
you.
about Dimitrov? Did he get to a final?
No,
okay, no.
Dimitrov.
Burditch did, I think. I'm thinking
Very
about this now.
good. Yes,
Yeah.
you could have had.
Berrettini?
No, you could have
No.
had Thomas Burditch. You could have also had Gael Monfils.
Oh, Monfils.
Fabio Fognini perhaps defeated a very surprise entrance, Dusan Lajovic.
Oh, never have got
I'd
that.
never have got that.
Yeah, Kei Nishikori.
Oh,
And then we're going back into like the pre-Fed era. You could have had Rainer Schuttler.
wow.
Guillermo Correa, Carlos Moya, Juan Carlos Ferrero, Gustavo Kuerten, and then we're going into, very impressive. Any of our listeners got these. Hicham Arazi, Dominic Habrati, and the first champion in 2000, Cedric Pierlin.
Wow. Some names from the past there.
I've just looked this up, and I cannot believe that Dominic Thiem never made it past a quarterfinal in Monte Carlo. It's his least successful clay court event.
Well, maybe we shouldn't be expecting too much from him.
Well, he's playing Gasquet, so that'll be a tough one anyway.
French number one.
French number one.
What's in our mailbag this week? Let's have a look there next. Dominique has got in touch with us actually on email. This is a really interesting question actually from Dominique. She says there are 6 ATP 250 tournaments on the clay before the start of Roland Garros qualifying, but there's only one WTA 250 tournament, and that's out in Bogota, which we've just had. Why is there such a disparity in the tour calendars? Are there too many 250 opportunities for the men and too few for the women? I didn't realise that this was the case, and that there was such a lack of 250s for the women on the clay. Joel, you're nodding your head. You sort of agree this is unfair. What's your opinion on this?
This week I was looking at the Stuttgart qualifying entry list, and it was like, the quality was higher, I felt, than Bogota. It feels very surprising that there are so few opportunities, I feel, for lower ranked female players to get match practice in before the French Open, particularly I think at a time where we see all these kind of single year licenses crop up across the tours on the ATP and WTA side. I don't know if the ATP are just a bit more flexible and open to these licenses than the WTA side, but it feels like this has become just a glaring omission that doesn't feel, when you look at the competition and how fair that is and the integrity, it doesn't feel that is particularly fair, I think, to lower ranked players who are probably going to have to look elsewhere in terms of maybe even dropping down to the an ITF level type event. So for me, it's an omission that I think the WTA need to get fixed, and it's maybe looking at those single year licenses and be like, well, hang on, we've got an issue here. We need to go sort it out and grant some of these single year licenses for events so that these lower ranked players can play. Because at the moment we're just looking at the glitz and the glam of the top ones like Madrid and, as I say, kind of Stuttgart. But we've got to cater for more players than that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very fair, for the players who will be playing in the French Open, that they don't get the chance to play some good matches beforehand. And I have had a quick check, and there are 4 125 events, but they are at the same level as Challenger. They're the equivalent for the WTA. So there are a few, but there's still a lot more Challenger events.
And let's be realistic as well. Like Bogota, that experience, as I said, the altitude, all those factors, that's just not going to be good practice, I feel, for the French Open, realistically, South America to Europe.
Yeah, and also then you have to make the quick transition over, as you say. So it's kind of a bit of an anomaly there, where you'd have to kind of do some quite odd travel arrangements to then get yourself back for whatever matches you have. So it does feel like that the ATP, as you say, is much better at kind of filling the calendar. I think they did a couple of tournaments in Italy last year when there was a swap at the scheduling around not being in China. They put in some 250s in Naples and Florence, I think, and they're much better at kind of making sure that if players do want to play tennis, there is a tournament they can play at, I would say. So this was a very good spot in terms of the fact there are so few, but I think in terms of why, I think you just have to think it's probably organizational, and the fact that they aren't necessarily able to get them sorted and the calendar kind of aligned in a more positive way. Yeah,
because you could potentially be having, I don't know, top 50 players playing at ITF events, which then has knock-on effects for the players who would normally be at the ITF events, and then it's just not really fair for everyone, and everyone should be kind of given a fair chance to play at tournaments that are kind of on a par with their ranking. So they need to sort this out, because I think actually historically there have been a lot more, but it's something obviously with the way that tournament licenses are given or the way it's set up, it's just been dropping kind of in the last few years. And I don't know how much of that is the pandemic.
Guys, don't worry. I can see it now. The Tennis Weekly International 250 WTA event out
Where
in
are you
Croydon.
hosting that?
In
Croydon.
Croydon Shopping
yes.
Centre.
What, clay courts of Croydon?
Yeah, love it. Prime location, prime environment, just outside London.
Fran
Make it
Jones,
happen.
you've got a wild card, or maybe direct entry.
The clay of Croydon.
Sara
There we go.
Irani. We'll give all our player
Seeded,
participation
seeded.
money to Sara Irani, yes.
On that note, no, great question, Dominic. I mean, you've potentially, solved the problem with the tournament in Croydon for you there. Thanks, Joel, for your ingenuity. And talking about tournaments, there's been a tournament out in the States, actually, which is the Pickleball Slam. And before listeners think, what on earth are we talking about? Which is what I thought when I first heard about this. Pickleball is... sort of like tennis, and it's kind of an alternative to tennis that is developing and growing fast. It seems to be very popular in the States. It's a bit of a war developing between tennis and pickleball. Joel, can you tell us what on earth pickleball is, and why is it so popular, and why are top tennis players, ex-top tennis players, getting involved in it?
Well, I think they're getting involved in it because of the money to begin with. I think the reason this has taken up so much traction is because, there've been some headlines coming out with this event that in terms of the ratings and the viewers it pulled nearly 800,000 viewers, which was more than a lot of American sport events that were going on at the time. They had players like John McEnroe, Andre Agassi as well playing, Michael Chang was there. And yeah, it's essentially kind of like tennis on a smaller court, a harder ball. It's almost like a mini tennis court, and it makes this, to me, like this comical sound with these smaller rackets. Not too dissimilar, I think, to paddle tennis. But I think for me, what's interesting is like, is it a threat to tennis? And how's it kind of work with paddle as well? Because I think pickleball to me is much more further along in terms of its evolution in the States versus than in Europe, where paddle I think is actually more prominent. But yeah, I feel like it's here to stay. Whether it's sustainable, I'm not sure. Are these viewers just watching because of these these big names in these unfamiliar environments, like not on a normal sized tennis court perhaps? I'm still a bit kind of curious in terms of its sustainability, and it's whether yes, people are interested because it's new, but beyond that, is it going to have the legs that obviously tennis has, and is it going to be a threat to the main tour? I think is the scary question for the bods on the the ATP and WTA circuits.
Yeah, I haven't actually really seen any of it, so I don't want to knock it till I've tried it, but it does sound very similar to paddle. And I think if they're both going to be on the scene plus tennis, there's a bit of
it's a lot
dilution going on here, and maybe they'll have to pick either one or the other.
From a funding perspective, that is quite a question, right? Because you can't necessarily support for the LTA, for example, here in the UK. That would be a question from being able to support the three different sports. But it does make me think that the reason why maybe pickleball is doing so well is because it does have that quite simple bat and ball element to it. It's much more like a beach sort of game, and I think it's very accessible in that sort of sense. So obviously it's not played on a beach. I don't want to mislead listeners. But for example, when you do get some of the legends of the game, it's very accessible in terms of how you're able to play it, and it does make a wonderfully fun noise. It does look quite impressive.
I can't stand that noise, Chris.
I also think it's on the wrong side of jolly when it comes to hitting something quite hard, and it just makes this sort of almost like a ding as opposed to a proper hit. But I don't think it will be like a massive threat. I think it might actually just be an add-on sometimes in the run-up for a tennis tournament. It might be a bit more of a supporter of tennis. I think it could be quite nice to have big events connected to big events, and at Rome last year, people were playing paddle as well as playing tennis. So maybe everything can help each other in this respect.
Yeah, and it might be something that a bog standard adult might get involved with, like paddle rather than tennis, if it's easier and more accessible, smaller courts. I love a
Less
bit
space.
of beach bat and ball, so maybe I would enjoy pickleball more.
Could be a sport, Kim.
Could be my sport. Yeah, I'd never heard of it until the other week, and maybe we could all give it a go. Do a tennis weekly session somewhere. Find it in the UK.
As long as there's no clash with the Croydon Tennis Weekly International.
Of course.
Exactly.
Well, maybe it'll be Croydon Tennis Weekly, international for 3 different types of racket sport.
Oh, now you're
throw
talking.
badminton in as well.
Half
Just
of
That
the
would be a
course.
very interesting
Next level.
setup.
Watch this space. But let's talk about tennis tournaments that we do have happening. We've got the Monte Carlo Masters, as we've mentioned. It's very much underway. I think Andy Murray is actually on court as we speak against Alex de Minaur. Joel, how excited are you that Andy Murray is back playing this tournament again?
He's on a clay court. Yeah, he's on a clay court. I think last year was very odd. I think he played Madrid but didn't play the French Open. I think maybe he was a little bit confused in terms of what his body could do, in terms of the wear and tear and the grind of being on a clay. So it's great, I think, from that perspective to see that he's confident enough in his body that he's willing to give the clay court season a go. I mean, just looking at from the British perspective, I'm sort of glad he's there because we had Cam Norrie go out earlier today, which wasn't the best of starts. We have had Jack Draper come through against Sebastian Baez, which to me is a very, very, very decent result against a very handy clay courter, particularly given the sort of injury niggles that are sort of niggling away, I think, at Draper at the moment. So, it's nice to see Murray there, but it's a completely open field, I feel. No Nadal, no Alcaraz. Yes, Novak Djokovic is back. Yes, Stefanos Tsitsipas is there, but Djokovic hasn't played for a while. Tsitsipas, I think, is not at the level he would want to be. Didn't have the greatest sunshine double, let's say. So yeah, I think it's really all to play for, and who knows, maybe we get a final that is on the lines of like a Fognini Lajovic, because of the big names not there, and as I said, we've got names who I don't necessarily think are performing at the levels that they have been used to or we've seen in the past.
I'm not sure Andy Murray is going to make it to the final though, based on the stats from that first set. He actually has already lost it 6-1 and he hit 15 unforced errors to just 2 winners.
Ooh.
Okay.
So let's hope that he could do.
He loves a
classic Murray
3-setter. Come on.
3-setter. It's going to be a 3-setter, surely.
I mean, yeah, I think it is quite an open field. I'm still expecting Djokovic to have a decent tournament. I think, Yannick Sinner, Novak Djokovic could be a quarterfinal, and given Sinner's, recent form, that could be quite interesting. I think Jack Draper could. He would have Hubert Hurkacz next, but I think Jack could win that one.
Casper, I think my money's on Casper. I think he's going to do it. I'm feeling
finally
optimistic.
win a Masters?
I just think he's playing himself into form. He might lose a few sets on the way, but I think I can see him.
I think that bottom half particularly is quite open, given I feel like Ruud is there and Tsitsipas and Taylor Fritz. I mean, yes, I think he's shown the most consistency, I think, actually, out of all those three, but you wouldn't necessarily say clay is his strongest surface. So I'm expecting a little bit of a surprise person maybe coming through that part potentially of the draw.
I'm still going to go for a Djokovic-Tsitsipas final. I'm sticking with the top 2 seeds. What about you guys?
I'm going to go Sinner versus Casper.
Ooh.
I don't believe that will happen, though.
I'm going to go Yannick Sinner as well. I'm going to go Yannick Sinner versus Andrei Rublev.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all plausible combinations, I think. So it'll be quite interesting. I'm just glad we're back on the clay. I love Monte Carlo. I'm going to whack a bit of Andy Murray on and a bit of Dominic Thiem later, I think. He's playing Gasquet, so going to give that one a watch as well. But this week, later on in the week, we do have some tennis that we're actually going to be at, which is very exciting.
Very exciting.
Coventry, not Croydon. We're going to Coventry for the Billie Jean King Cup qualifier between France and Great Britain. So the winning team from that will go to the Billie Jean King Cup finals, which will be in November this year. So we will be there. Tennis Weekly will be there at the Coventry Building Society Arena on Friday and Saturday. You guys are very experienced at going to Billie Jean King Cup finals, but it will be my debut.
We'll show you the ropes, Kim.
Yeah, we're tried and tested. We're hardcore. We know what's going on. But it should be an interesting one. I mean, Well, obviously we'll be doing some live shows from there to recap the action each day. But what's your gut feeling at the moment with GB versus France? Because you got to say France, assuming the top players play and they've got Garcia and Cornet, they go in as the favourites. Would you say?
Depends how much noise you're going to make in the arena, Joel, cheering GB on. If Garcia's there, I mean, I would say France are the favourites, but you can never underestimate home support. And, we know that the likes of Harriet Dart...
They do bring it. They do
on
up
her
their
day,
levels.
she can,
Yeah,
she's had some great wins in Billie Jean King Cup. So I don't think it's one-way traffic.
No, I think there will be some good opportunities. But I just hope that it's close. Obviously, I hope that GP get the win. But you do just think that, if Garcia is able to pick up 2, Cornet is also the second highest ranked player. I just think that we've learned from our experience at Billie Jean King Cup tournaments that you just want to see live matches. I think that's the live matches and live tennis.
Yeah. I mean, there's some other ties going on as well, all around the world. We've got USA, Austria, we've got Slovakia, Italy, Germany versus Brazil, Kazakhstan versus Poland, Spain versus Mexico, Ukraine versus Czech Republic, and Canada versus Belgium, and Slovenia versus Romania. So loads happening. Are there any other ties you're particularly looking at, thinking that's going to be, a great one if given the lineups?
I was looking forward to Kazakhstan, Poland because of Iga and Rybakina, but obviously that will not be happening because Iga's pulled out of that one. I think Tamara Paszek is actually playing for Austria, so I think I'll be watching that one against the USA if she plays. I think that could be interesting. And then Ukraine versus Czech Republic in a neutral location. That's quite an unprecedented situation, and I think it would be great to see how that one goes because there's some great players from both sides playing there.
Yeah, that's being held in Turkey, the Ukraine tie. So nice that they've been able to find a host for that one. We'll see how it goes, and we'll be back on the weekend with our sort of live updates and commentary from there. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very, very exciting. And if any of our listeners are in the Coventry Arena on both days and they want to see the Tennis Weekly team, just drop us a note on social media or on email. We're always happy to meet our listeners. So just give us a shout. But we're going to wrap it up there for this catch up from the Tennis Weekly podcast. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours.
We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email us on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back later in the week with some live episodes from Coventry. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.